Today, I'm speaking with one of the leaders in the diabetes space who led a group of what Dexcom called helicopter parents to get continuous glucose readings not only remotely monitored, but viewable on smartwatches with alerts well before we would see that come to devices like the Apple Watch. Welcome to the show. I'm Justin. I have type 1 diabetes, and on here, I talk all things diabetes tech news and research with industry leaders, healthcare providers, and those using the tech themselves. Today, I'm speaking with none other than Kate Farnsworth. She believed that everyone should have access to the early open source automated insulin systems, and she created the Looped Facebook group, which has helped over 30,000 people build the DIY loop system that was ahead of its time. It brought automated insulin but years before pharmaceutical companies would, and it continues to be a great source for people. In fact, I use it myself. Her and I get into how the early open source tech transformed her relationship with her daughter, how she pushed Health Canada to accept DIY algorithms, and the soldering nights she hosted with dozens of parents so that they could have the power of CGM remote monitoring. Then we get into her transition from open source into the medtech space, her work at Beta Bionics and now at Sequel MedTech, the makers of Twist, and the value of having people like her on the inside that are passionate about helping people in the community and have their best interests in mind. Keep in mind that my content is not medical advice. Always consult with your medical team before making changes to your healthcare. Open source apps are experimental. They are not approved by the FDA or regulatory authorities. You take full responsibility for building and using them, and you do so at your own risk. All right, let's get into it. Kate, welcome to the show. Welcome to the Diabetech Studios.
Thank you so much for having me. I love the new setup.
You know, it's so funny. I had seen your name around back in my early days of diabetes tech reporting, and then we finally met maybe a couple years ago at one of the conferences, and you introduced yourself. I was like, no freaking way. You are Kate Farnsworth. You are, so deep in the open source community. And when we talked before this recording and you told me your story, I was like, people need to know what happened. So tell us, how did you land in the diabetes space?
My daughter, Sydney, was diagnosed with diabetes when she was 8, almost 9. And at that time, there was no way for me to know what her blood sugar was without poking her fingers multiple times a day. Very quickly in her diagnosis, we learned about CGMs and how they were a game changer for managing diabetes. So they weren't available in Canada. I'm in Canada. So somebody in the community donated us a Dexcom G4 to us, and that was amazing. We could, she had a receiver, she could hear her blood sugar, she could know what it is. Well, she could see her blood sugar and get alarms. But there was no way for me to see what was going on when she wasn't with me. So she would take that receiver and go to school, and she was a kid in elementary school. That alarm would go off saying she was high or low, and she would press the button to silence it and shove it in her pocket because she didn't want to stand out in any way. And she'd come home at the end of the day and I'd say, what happened? Why did you ignore diabetes? Why didn't you deal with this? Like, it was a very difficult time in our relationship because I was judging, I was worried as a mom because she wasn't managing diabetes the way I wanted her to or needed her to. And she just wanted to be a kid and not stand out in any way. So I looked for a way to be able to see her blood sugar when she wasn't with me. And I Googled and I found that amazing parents had come up with this way to see blood sugar remotely called Night Scout.
Before we get into Night Scout, what were alarms like at the time for CGM?
They were loud. We couldn't hear the alarms when she was, so the receiver had to stay very close to her. We couldn't hear the alarms from our bedroom at night. So we were
Oh,
still getting
wow.
up in the middle of the night to check the receiver to see what was going on. It was, CGM was a game changer. We could now see what was happening in real time, but we could only do that if we were physically present with the receiver. There was no way for us to see what was happening when we're in our bedroom or hear the alarms from our bedroom or when she was at school or at sleepovers, things like that. So we just didn't do those things.
And how did you navigate that? Like, what did a typical night at that time look like? Were you going into her room every couple hours to make sure things were good? Like, how did
Yeah.
you sleep?
Yeah, no, I didn't sleep.
Wow.
I didn't sleep, and we would set an alarm at 3 o'clock every night to be able to check, and then get up multiple times throughout the night if she had eaten something different or she had had more activity during the day. So there was very little sleep happening. There was more sleep with the CGM than prior to that, but still, sleep was not something that I got a lot of.
And you had mentioned that her endocrinologist at the time, before you had someone send you a CGM, they were like, CGMs, they're overrated. They're not that great.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, they said people hate them. They alarm all the time. They're inaccurate and parents don't like them. And I thought I think we should make our own judgments about this technology. What's right for one person isn't necessarily right for another. So I fought hard to be able to get one. Well, I got one from the community, but then eventually she did give us a prescription for the Dexcom when it came to Canada. She saw the light in the
Yeah.
CGM once we proved that it was valuable to us.
What is the difference between Canada and the US when it comes to diabetes technology?
Canada's a huge geography with not a lot of people. So the population of Canada is similar to the population of California. So we have a huge span of geography without a lot of people, which means that it's very expensive for medical devices to be able to distribute here. You need a field sales team that covers a huge geography. So oftentimes device manufacturers make the decision not to come to Canada, but we require a similar path to FDA, which is Health Canada, and it's very expensive to go through that regulatory pathway twice. So we often get things late or later than you do in the United States, and sometimes not at all.
So you mentioned this. You said that it was putting a strain on your relationship with your daughter, having to be the bad cop every time she got home. That led you on this search for answers of like, can I see these remotely? Is that what you were thinking? You were like, there's got to be a way to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. I figured there has to be that we've got this information over here. We have all this access to technology and Wi-Fi
And the internet, right?
in the
Yeah.
internet. We're so connected. There has to be a way for me to be able to see what is happening with her blood sugar when she's not with us.
Yeah, I mean, if at the time, if you could receive text messages on a phone, and yeah, there's Wi-Fi, right? Like, it's almost surprising that this didn't exist pretty early on, because it just seems so, like, so needed. And you found posts on social media, right? What were these posts that you saw?
So I saw a child with her dog, and in her backpack was a phone with a wire connected to her Dexcom CGM receiver. And that was sending the information into the cloud, and then her parents were able to see the information remotely.
And was that Night Scout?
That was the early days of Night Scout. Yep.
Yeah, we had Lane Desborough, the co-founder of Night Scout, on the show not long ago. So The early days weren't so simple though, right? Like it was a pretty convoluted system to get that set up.
Yeah, it was very difficult. It was in GitHub, so you had to find the code, you had to set up different applications to be able to get the code to the cloud, and you had to use an Android phone wired to this receiver at all times to be able to send the information. So the kids were headed to school with this rather large brick of technology in order to make this happen.
And it wasn't in millimoles yet, right? Like it had only ever been used with milligrams per deciliter, yet you use millimoles. So like, how did you get it to work?
Yeah, so Ben West actually was one of the first people that helped me out to be able to set it in millimole. And I remember that moment, just like not having to divide everything by 18, to be able to see her blood sugar in the units that made sense to us. But yeah, it was really incredibly life-changing moment.
And I'm sure you also realized that there are so many other parents out there that are still struggling the way you were just before you started using it. Is that what inspired the CGM in the Cloud Facebook group? Were you part of that creation of that group?
That group existed before I started, so it had very few members. I think I was member number 50 or something like that. It was very early on, and that really was my introduction to We Are Not Waiting and to the broader diabetes community in the DIY world. And that group instilled the pay it forward methodology that I have used since then in everything I've done diabetes related.
What does that mean?
It means that this is a gift that we've been given by the community, by the people that came before us, by the Lanes and the John Costicks and the Ben Wests of the world. And we have an obligation to pay that forward in every way we can. So for me, I jumped in and started supporting other families that wanted to use Night Scout. So we had technical support, everything that we could do to make it easier for those families. But some people aren't technical. So they might pay it forward by donating sensors to other families or giving a low carb recipe. It was really however you could pay forward to the community what had been given to you.
Yeah, and I often feel that energy throughout this community. Everyone knows how much diabetes sucks and how hard it can be on not only the person with diabetes, but the family. So whenever I'm in these spaces with people, people are trading their little secrets of like, oh, like I just tried this system, or oh, I'm eating this food now, or oh, I learned to carb count this, whatever it is. There's this instant connectedness and wanting to help and support that happens immediately with each other, which is what I love. And there's nothing I love more than when a friend comes to me or someone in the space comes to me and DMs me and is like, hey, I really want to try this new system. What do you think? Like, I may not answer comments because I don't have the time, but DMs, I try really hard to get back to everyone's DMs because I want to pay it forward too. Creating my video thing, but I love engaging and giving people my 2 cents and helping guide people, I guess. It feels really good to just, I get it.
It does. It feels amazing to know that you're helping these families. But when you see a kid go on their first sleepover because of the technology that they've received, if you see like new freedoms and for us an improvement in our relationship, it's really exciting and invigorating, and it makes you want to help more families.
This episode is sponsored by Omnipod. You guys know that staying connected to the tech world is important to me, but what's also important to me is my insulin pump. Omnipod 5 is tubeless and waterproof, which means I never have to disconnect from automated insulin delivery, even when I take a shower, go swimming, or go to the gym. Staying connected to my insulin pump means I'm spending more time in automated mode, which ultimately helps me spend more time in range. See if you're eligible for a 10-day trial by visiting omnipod.com/diabetic. On there, you'll see full safety and risk information and trial terms. Again, that's omnipod.com/diabetic. So next you would learn how to code. You would teach yourself, and that's because of a device called the Pebble Watch. Tell everyone what the Pebble Watch was, or I guess is, because it's around now too.
It's around again. So the Pebble Watch was a watch that you could purchase and write code for so that you could create your own watch faces. And it was the way that we were able to, on our wrists, have the information from Night Scout in real time at a glance. So this was huge for Sydney and I because she could now glance down and see what her blood sugar was instead of having to have those alarms that interrupted her day. And it also allowed me, because through Night Scout I could see what was happening, message her and it would show up on her watch and then she could deal with it in real time.
You would get like text messages on the watch?
Yeah, but there were error codes that showed on that watch face that looked like really low blood sugars instead of error codes, and that would scare parents. It would make them think that their child was low when they really weren't. So my first quest was just to add the images that showed on the receiver onto the watch. And I didn't know how to do that. So Christine Deltrap actually took on that work, and then we worked together and I got into the code and learned how to code myself so that I could build watch faces for more people as well.
Wow. So ahead of its time.
It was huge. It was before Apple Watch. It was amazing. That was one of the biggest changes. So then when Sydney came home at the end of the day, I would ask her how her day was instead of what happened with her blood sugar. It completely changed the dynamic for us.
Yeah, tell us more about that. Like, was there a moment where that hit you of like, whoa, I'm actually allowed to just not be judgmental here anymore? Like,
No.
We both know what happened already. Like, now we can focus on other things.
Yeah, it was that first day when she came home from school and I asked her what she had done on the playground instead of, what her blood sugar number was. I knew what it was. I had seen it. We had dealt with whatever had happened. I could see that everything was okay or I knew what had happened. So there was no question about diabetes anymore. It was mom and kid rather than parent and diabetes, I guess.
With that rig that you were talking about that she would need to carry around in order to send out these readings, other people needed those rigs too. And you mentioned that you would host like soldering nights.
Yeah, so as an evolution of the technology, there was an X-strip box that you could build. So instead of having that wired rig with the phone and the cable and the receiver, this essentially replaced the receiver portion. So it would be wireless to a phone. This was a huge deal because in the early days, you had a phone with a wire connected to the receiver. Because the wire was connected to the receiver, you couldn't charge that phone. So you had to have two different phones, one for day, one for night. It was a lot to have to manage. But again, very brilliant people in the community came up with something called X-strip, which was a microcomputer essentially replacing the receiver. So now you had a wireless way to get the data to the phone, to the cloud. And this was a little bit more complicated than people were ready to do or everyone was ready to do. So I learned how to solder. My father-in-law taught me how to solder. And we would invite people over to my house. One time, I think we had 80 people here.
Wow.
Three of us would sit soldering, and three of us would sit putting the code on these X strips and get people set up so that they could use this technology in their lives.
It just blows my mind that the community needed to come together to do all this, to have soldering nights, to just have the simple thing of having glucose levels sent directly to you as a parent. And it speaks to how incredible this community is, and specifically the open source community.
Yeah.
And how they've in many ways worked together to get everyone access to technology that is possible but not available through the FDA cleared systems yet. A big mantra of the space is "we are not waiting." What does that mean to you?
It's evolved for me over the years. In the early days, it was, we're not waiting for someone to create a solution so that we can sleep at night. We're not waiting for regulators to approve the technology so that our kids are safe. And they're not waiting for permission to have 80 people over to our houses to build X strips.
Well, and the crazy thing is, didn't like even Dexcom catch light of what you were doing and say like, these are helicopter parents? How did it feel to be called a helicopter parent by people in the industry?
It was really a challenge. Part of me was a little bit proud, that yes, I am a helicopter parent and I'm keeping my kids safe and I have access to information that I wouldn't have otherwise. It really impressed on me how out of touch potentially they were, that this was such a giant need for so many people, and they didn't see it that way.
Yeah, Lane had a similar situation when he was at Medtronic. He told me about how he got access to the MySentry, which they built for remote monitoring. And the marketing team was like, no, we don't know how to market this. We can't do it. So they didn't sell it. They didn't sell this remote monitor. And so he wound up building his own. And then that's what inspired Night Scout. So people should go listen to that story after this, because it's so cool hearing the stories of all of you in your different areas of this space and how you come together to strengthen this community and open access to these features that didn't exist. We have a whole library of open source conversations. So I'll throw a bunch of those in the show notes.
Yeah, it really is incredible that it wasn't one person. It was so many people that changed the world for people living with diabetes. Some gave code, others created support documents, others did technical support. Really, what the DIY or open source community has been able to achieve is incredible, and it's sort of the best of humanity all in one.
It really is. It's a story that needs to be told because it is so lovely to hear and inspiring. And I'll never forget when I first learned about it, because someone was like, oh, you should try DIY Loop. This is a good system. And then I started using it, and I don't even know how I dove into the history of it. And maybe it's referenced on Loop Docs, the website of like where this comes from. It's gotta be, because that must be where it kind of led me into the journey of asking like the who was behind this. I probably found like Nate Ratcliffe's Medium post, which lays out everything on how Loop came about, and then that like made me want to dive even deeper. On the note of DIY Loop, so you got down remote monitoring, you're doing this, but then you must catch light of, oh wow, people are not only do they have their numbers, but they're automating insulin delivery with these numbers, something that did not exist at the time with FDA cleared systems. So you and your daughter, you'd use OpenAPS, then you'd move over to DIY Loop. What was that transition like? How did it feel to all of a sudden have a machine not only just deliver insulin continuously, but make decisions and hold back insulin or give more when it was needed?
I To me, it's like the invention of the light bulb. Like, it was
Yeah.
massively different for us. Her pump before then would keep insulin delivery steady. It was like keeping the gas in your car, like the gas pedal on all times. Even if she was dropping low, it would continue to give the same amount of insulin. This allowed suddenly for her to take your foot off the gas pedal and try and prevent those lows or give more gas when she was rising higher. Like it was again another game changer. DIY Loop for us was incredibly life-changing. And so I wanted to make that happen or make it easier for other families to be able to do too.
But your endo didn't feel the same way, right? Your endo was a bit apprehensive or worried here. So what happened there when they found out about this? How did you approach the subject with them?
Well, I probably did not approach the subject in the best way. She was running late. I was running late for a flight. So we had 15 minutes in the endo's office. And I said, I've built my daughter a pancreas from instructions I found on the internet. And it's going really well. And she said, What did you do? What? I know nothing about this. I'm nervous about this. I don't understand it. And I need to know more. So we left. She called us in between visits. I call it like being called to the principal's office, essentially. She sat Sydney and I down and she said to Sydney, I want you to know that what your mom's doing is not approved and could be potentially dangerous. And I said to her, I can't imagine doing something that would put my daughter in danger. I've done research. There are many people using this technology. I've watched it work. It is working for her. You can see the outcome of this technology for her. You can see that it's doing better for her. And so eventually she did come around and became a resource for other looping families. But I think it was scary for her. It was unknown, unproven. There was no research on it. There was no Health Canada approval for this technology. She was using a Health Canada approved pump, but the algorithm had not been reviewed by any governing body.
Yeah, it was very taboo. And even to this day, for many healthcare providers, remains taboo. And providers won't feel comfortable speaking to patients about it, even though in the standards of care in the US, and I believe Canada as well, it is recommended that doctors at least broach the subject and provide support when patients come in, which is a huge leap or a huge achievement in the space to get it recognized in such a way. How did it feel to use such advanced technology, option of insulin, while so many other people didn't have access to that?
It really was a struggle for me. I wanted as many families as would benefit from this technology to have access to it. It felt like there were way too many barriers for them to get started. It wasn't easily accessible at all when we first started. That it was very technical, it was very complicated, it was intimidating for people, and it was unsupported by healthcare providers. So there were tons of barriers that people had to overcome to be able to use the technology.
But there was work done by you and other partners to help alleviate that, right? So is that kind of what it would inspire the DIY Loop Facebook group, Looped? Did you create that group?
I did.
Okay, wow, incredible. Tell us about why.
I wanted to help as many families as possible get on this technology and have access to it, much like the work we had done in the CGM in the cloud group for Night Scout. I wanted a way for us to be able to support families who were interested in DIY looping. So it wasn't just Loop at the time, it was Open APS and Android APS and Loop. And I thought we'd help 100 families. It turned out that this is really exciting, and there was a massive need for technology like this. So it's been way more popular than I thought it would be.
Yeah, I mean, it's over 50,000 people now.
It's over 33,000.
Over 30. Okay. It feels bigger. I mean, you led a movement. You continue to lead a movement. How has Looped changed the game?
I think it's helped so many families get access to the technology. We have incredible volunteers who step forward and help 24/7. It's become a worldwide group. So anytime, night or day, you have a problem with your DIY loop, there's somebody there that can support you. We've got Katie DeSimone was my partner when we started the group. She created phenomenal docs that have been taken on by others now, and the instructions and the build process has just become infinitely easier because of people continuing to pay it forward.
Yeah, I mean, when I first started 3 years ago and I read those documents, it was just so accessible and easy to understand. And the way it's written of like, and when you do this, and don't worry, it will take a couple minutes. Like it's written like your best friend wrote these instructions. And Katie did such a phenomenal job. I actually had the privilege of getting to speak with her before she passed. And she told me a lot about the story of Loop and the history. And so I feel so privileged to have been able to get to know her.
Yeah. She was
at that time.
She was a fierce force to be reckoned with. I was so grateful to have her as my partner, and she could be fiery, but that was the passion that she had for this. And so a lot of the success and ease of access for people was built on the foundation that she put in place.
Yeah. So you would go on to co-author a piece related to open source tech in Canada. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we wrote a position paper on DIY technology and how healthcare providers should support it, and that they really had an obligation to do so. That there was no legal risk to supporting folks who wanted to use this technology. And then there was a companion piece that sort of helped healthcare providers learn how to use DIY and prescribe it for their patients.
How did it feel to have that work be recognized in such a big way?
To me, it legitimized a lot of what we were doing already. to have some of the smartest endocrinologists in Canada support the work we're doing and see the benefit of the technology for people living with diabetes was huge. And it really allows healthcare providers to feel more comfortable using this technology.
Today's episode is sponsored by T1D Exchange. You can directly make an impact on diabetes healthcare, treatments, and technology by participating in the T1D Exchange registry. It starts with a simple survey about your life with T1D, and it only takes about 15 minutes. After that, you'll have a personal portal with ongoing T1D study and survey opportunities. Plus, some of these studies even offer compensation. Signing up with the link in the show notes helps support my channel, and it allows me to continue putting out free content. You can sign up at t1dexchange.org/diabetic or click that link in today's show notes. You're now in the diabetes space on the medtech side. You start off by working with Beta Bionics. So what were you doing there? How did that happen?
So because of the work I had done in the community, they approached me and asked me to take on their social media at first. And I got to work with them for over 5 years and really got to evolve my work from community and social media to marketing, and then building out some of their pre-launch materials for the iLet.
Okay, gotcha. What was appealing about stepping into the commercial space after years of open source?
My goal is always to help as many people as possible. So I think that's the common thread throughout every choice I've made. So I'm really trying to help people living with diabetes in every way that I can. So my work continued on the DIY and open source space. Thankfully, the positions that I've been afforded allow me to continue that work. But there are people that are not going to choose DIY or open source, and I want to help them too. So that's where
was there pushback at all when you went to the dark side? Some people could say, worked for a corporation in the space, who there's profit involved in those companies. Did anyone in the space kind of not support that? Not that it matters.
Yeah. Yes, always. There's always those folks who feel that it's contrary to the DIY or open source ethos to work for a company that is selling a solution. And I have fought really hard to keep DIY and open source free for as many people as possible. That's really important to me. Diabetes is really expensive. There are also those who cannot access that technology. So it's still, as easy as we've made it, it's still intimidating. It's still complicated. There's a fear of trying a new technology that's not FDA cleared. And so for those people, I want to work on solutions that will help them.
Yeah. Tell me about the people you were meeting on the medtech space. What were they just as passionate as you?
Yes. I mean, I think that what I've learned in moving to medtech is that people are passionate about their work. They just get paid for it. Right. I've chosen organizations to work with that I believe are aligned with my values, so that they really truly want the best for people living with diabetes.
Now, tell me about how you land at Sequel MedTech. They're the makers of Twist. Last week's episode was on the Twist. it kind of came out of nowhere for me, at least, when this pump got cleared. And I think you said that it kind of came out of nowhere for you. So how did you get connected with them?
Yeah, so it did come out of nowhere. They were in stealth mode for a long time and then magically appeared. A colleague of mine who had worked at Beta Bionics with me had moved to SQL and said, I think you really need to talk to these people. They're using the FDA cleared version of Loop in their system. And I thought that was really exciting and intriguing. So I went to DData and actually had my first interview with them there. And at that meeting, Dean Kamen spoke about Twist. It was like my worlds were colliding. So I've been involved in diabetes for a long time on a volunteer and work capacity.
Yeah, and just so everyone knows, Dean came in, he invented the original consumer insulin pump that was wearable that people could, wear around. And now Sequel MedTech, the sequel, there is the Twist pump. Go on.
Dean Kamen also founded First Robotics. And my youngest daughter is a passionate participant in First Robotics competitions. So it was like my two worlds, diabetes tech and robotics combined, and it just felt like kismet for me. And they asked me what I'd like to do, and that led me to where I am today.
They were like, yeah, we need you here, or we want you here. But what are you going to do? what makes the most sense? That's cool.
Yeah.
What are you doing there?
So I work on the marketing team. I do a lot of work with people living with diabetes. I look after our partnerships, so with different organizations. I also lead our community work and our social media. So I get to work with a lot of amazing people living with diabetes every day.
How did it feel to hear that a pump that will be on the market is using the same base algorithm, Loop, after all of these years of using it in the other side of things, and knowing that people could start using it themselves, more people?
It's so exciting to me. As easy as we made it on the DIY side, with all of the amazing volunteers providing technical support and instructions, it was still intimidating. It is still intimidating and complicated for people. So I saw this as an opportunity for more people to have access to the technology that had really changed our lives, with the way that you can personalize it, the way that you can, you have all of the levers to be able to adjust, and it expands access for so many more people.
And the Twist is algorithm agnostic, right? So what does that mean exactly?
Technically, Twist could work with many different algorithms. It wasn't created with one algorithm in mind. Twist is designed to be an interoperable device. So that means that it can work with many different CGMs. So right now it works with the Libre 3 Plus sensor, and will soon work with the Eversense 365 sensor. It means that it could work with other approved sensors in the future. It could work with different algorithms, and really becomes the choice for people living with diabetes who want different options. Not every sensor works for every person. Not every algorithm works for every person. So this is an opportunity to have a lot of options for people living with diabetes.
Now, Twist is out and it gives people access to Loop, but that doesn't mean the open source community is done.
Absolutely not.
What work is left for them to do, you think?
I think that I hope that the DIY world never stops pushing, never stops iterating, never stops creating the solutions that work for the people that live with diabetes. It keeps the pressure on the device manufacturers, it keeps the pressure on the regulators, and it allows us to think bigger as well.
Right. And often, or in so many ways, open source has continued to set the standard of like, this is possible. People are doing it. Why can't you do it? You need to do this faster. It's possible that AID systems that came out after Loop wouldn't have happened as fast if Loop didn't happen, right? And now you have all these fantastic AID systems, but you still need to bolus for them. You still need to set targets that may not work as well for some users. They want, more customization, and you've got the open source community continuing to put out these features, test these out. Back when you were deep in the open source community, you were pushing for, remote monitoring of CGMs, AID systems, things that feel like we need them so badly. Is there as much passion or as many people fighting now that we have AID?
There are a huge number of people that are still passionately working towards a solution or better solutions now in the DIY or open source world. What I'll say is it's different than it was because we were in the dark in the early days and somebody created light. That was massively life-changing. Now we're tweaking and fine-tuning and improving the technology beyond where it is today. So to me, it's there are commercial solutions that do meet the needs of more people now. So it's not as big of a groundswell as it was in those early days of Night Scout or open source AID systems.
What would you say to the mainstream tech companies as to how they should respond to open source? Because they still are a bit slow to get things done that's happening in open source, which can feel frustrating, understandably so, because there is regulation, but it almost feels like it should be a bit faster. So what are your hopes for the industry as a whole?
Being on the other side of it now, I understand why it's slower than we want it to be. In DIY and open source, we can move as fast as we would like to, and we iterate quickly, and we have all of these ideas coming in from different sources, and really we're able to create solutions much more quickly without the regulatory pathways that device manufacturers have to follow. What I would say to all of the med tech companies is keep pushing, keep creating better solutions, never settle. And that's one of the things I love about SQL is it's part of our ethos, never settle. So we're constantly looking for solutions that will improve the technology, improve the lives of people living with diabetes, and never just saying what we have is good enough.
Yeah, and I'm so happy to see Sequel coming out with their pump. There being more pumps on the market, because the more pumps there are, the more competition there is, and the more these companies will need to innovate faster in order to, bring people to their side. So, Kate, thank you so much for coming on the show. Your story is so incredible. It's inspiring. And I'm just so thankful for all the work that you did, because you truly paved the way for so many people, including me, to have not only access to these systems, but access to understanding how to set these up so easily. So it is so appreciated on behalf of everyone like me that used, the docs and the Looped Facebook group. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It was my pleasure.
Thank you all for listening and for your support. Now, if you made it all the way to the end, you must be a very tuned in listener, and I would so appreciate a review on your favorite podcast platform, or if you're watching on YouTube, feel free to comment. What do you think of Kate's story? Let me know in the comments, and we've got more episodes of this podcast every Monday, and my Libre 3 Plus video, my review just came out on YouTube, so you should go check that out. I get real deep into that continuous glucose monitor. It was a lot of fun. I'm Justin, and I'll talk to you later.